Talking points around Jalen Brunson and the Knicks coming off this incredible title run is the question of, is this the greatest free agency signing we've ever seen? Some people might push back against that. They might claim Shaq to the Lakers or LeBron going to Miami were more successful signings because those guys won multiple championships. They won MVPs. They reached higher highs. I think you're splitting hairs when talking about this. You can make an argument for a lot of different guys. I think I would personally go with Brunson just because of the way the move was panned at the time. He elevated his game to a superstar level, ended a 53-year title drought. Overall, that's just a better storyline to me than an already established superstar going and winning somewhere else. But whichever argument you want to make, I don't think that's the most interesting question here. I think the more interesting thing is figuring out if we will ever see anything like this again. Because zooming out to look at Brunson's time in Dallas, it's kind of wild how things played out. He was good there. He was a steady rotation guy his first 3 years in the league before taking a step in that fourth year, where he averaged 16 and 5, solid efficiency during that 21-22 season. He showed that he could manage an offense as a lead creator with Luka out, but it was in the playoffs where he really made a name for himself, where he dropped 41 against Utah in that series after declining a $55 million extension and betting on himself going into that postseason. And obviously, that gamble paid off pretty well for him as he would go on to sign that 4 year, $104 million contract with the Knicks that summer. When he got to New York for the first time in his career, it kind of felt like it was his team, even if he was almost a co star to Julius Randle because they basically split usage that year. But by year two, it was clear that he was running the show. He was the offensive initiator. You wanted the ball in his hands late in the game. And here's where I think it's the most important thing that people kind of overlook is that a lot of those traits that Brunson improved on in New York, the footwork, the pace, his ability to manufacture shots at all three levels, they were present in Dallas. Now, obviously, with a bigger role, his confidence grew and he really did work and refine those things. But I think it would be really interesting to see if there's a guy in the league currently that could replicate this rise to stardom that Brunson had, where they're in a smaller role, but they come in 4 or 5 minute stretches, whether that's off the bench or even within their starting unit, where they just take over the game. They're the best player on the court. You can see flashes in their offense or defensive game where this guy has star written all over him, but he hasn't really got that opportunity yet. And that's kind of the whole point of this video to see who out there in the league right now could make that ascension. All right, first player I want to talk about here out of the couple we got lined up is Ryan Rollins. His situation almost feels the most similar to Brunson's in Dallas, at least statistically, where Brunson in that 21-22 season showed that he can get step up as a scorer and primary ball handler when the star on his team goes down. Obviously, in Brunson's case, that was Luka. In Rollins' case, this last year, it was Giannis. The regular season numbers are also pretty close. Brunson that year averaged 16, 4, and 5. Rollins this past season averaged 17, 5, and 6. Rollins did not have that big playoff moment that Brunson had, but he still showed consistent and tangible growth across the season, where he posted career highs in minutes, points, rebounds, assists, all across the board. And he did that while making roughly like $4 million a year. That's like end of bench money for a guy who now, with Giannis going to Miami, will likely be the primary offensive piece next to the other pieces they received in that trade. Depending on what happens with Tyler Hero, even if they decide to move him to a third team or keep him, I still see Rollins having a pretty decent role. Also, the backstory is pretty similar to Brunson's. Rollins was an overlooked second round pick. He bounced around the league a bit, started with Golden State and Washington, where he played a grand total of 128 minutes across his first 2 seasons of the league. Even when he got to Milwaukee, he didn't initially get a shot. It took Dame getting injured, stretched, and waived for him to get any real minutes. Um, Pair that with Giannis missing time this year, Rollins really got a shot to emerge. And now, with definitive full time lead minutes going into next season, with the new coach and Taylor Jenkins, I really feel like Rollins has a good chance to continue on his path to ascension. But the real question is, and I'll be honest, this is a question for not just Rollins, but like basically every name on this list, is whether he can handle being a productive player with a star guy next to him to a guy that's actually going to be game planned against by opposing coaches. Brunson became a star because when teams started blitzing him, switching everything, throwing length at him, he kept finding answers anyway. We genuinely don't know if Rollins can do that yet, but on the numbers alone, he's at least earned the audition. All right. Next name up on this list is a little weird because it feels like the leap has already happened for this player, Nikhil Alexander Walker. He's coming off his most improved player nod last season, his first 20 point per game season. He doesn't feel like an undervalued entity right now, but I feel like there's still room for him to continue to grow into his role as a real star next to Jalen Johnson on this Hawks team, especially after that rough playoff stretch where I know he was going up against the eventual champions, but coming off a really good regular season where he had legit scoring moments, he put up 13 points per game while shooting 38% from the field and being a minus 81 against the Knicks in that series, while McCollum, his backcourt mate, just took over. Um, and the concern with Na right now is, can he continue to progress and can he sustain this level of play and even improve upon it, especially in the playoff and big game settings? And the reason I put him on this list is because it looks like Atlanta is betting that he will continue to get better. They haven't made any major moves this offseason. They've been linked to guys like Jalen Brown, but they haven't pulled the trigger. They decided to stick and pick and take Flemings at pick 8 in the draft and re sign McCollum. They traded for Aaron Wiggins. It feels like they're content with just adding to the fringes and letting this core progress. Um, the one thing with Nah, well, there really are two things. One, he's not really a stylistic comparison to Brunson or like a takeover scorer. Brunson's a possession by possession problem. He can bring it up. He calls his own action. He's a fearless scorer. While Nikhil is more of a two-way scoring guard. He's going to give you excellent defense, and he can be a shot maker within a system, but he's not going to be the hub to like a really, really great offense. Um, but he can have his moments. The other thing is he's 28 years old. He's noticeably older than the other players on this list that have been mentioned and will be mentioned. He should be in his quote unquote prime right now. And even if you deem him a late bloomer, this doesn't really give him a long runway for improvement. But he's kind of the whole concept of this list where he's kind of filed away as a finished product in Minnesota. He gets a decent contract that comes to Atlanta, and it shows that he actually wasn't a finished product. He was just waiting for somebody to hand him the ball and give him a bigger role. Um, and I do think he'll be able to sustain his level of play from last year. He can be a legit 1B next to Jalen Johnson if he can be more consistent. And depending on the shape of the East next year, could he get an All Star nod? Maybe. I doubt it because I feel like teams are going to be a lot healthier. There's going to be Jason Tatum's going to come back. Giannis is going to come back. He's going to have a lot of competition for that spot, but I think he could be a legit piece going forward. All right. I didn't want this video to be only guards. So I kind of scanned around the league to be like, what kind of wing slash big guy kind of fits the mold of what we're talking about here as a guy that can kind of take the next leap. Um, Jabari Smith Jr. is someone I zeroed in on. He's not really a stylistic comp to a Brunson or a wing that can go get his own shot like KD. But there's still growth there that I can see. He had the best season of his career last year. He averaged 16.7 rebounds, shot a career best 36% from three. And despite all that, it still felt like there was some meat left on the bone in his role on this offense in Houston specifically, especially considering the amount of injuries they had last season. Like he did show flashes with a slightly increased workload, but there was a lot more to be desired. And I don't know if Houston will make a splashy move this offseason and trade him, considering they had $50 million in payroll sitting out last year. They might just be fine getting healthy, adding Van Vliet and Adams back to the lineup and see where they are. But I do think if they were to make a move for a star like a Jalen Brown, like a Donovan Mitchell, Jabari would probably be the primary candidate that gets moved, considering his salary and desirability as a younger trade target. As things stand now, though, he's the fourth or fifth read in this Houston offense that runs through Kevin Durant first, Sengun, and Thompson. He's more of a play finisher in this system than genuinely someone that gets asked to create anything. And I think if you can drop him into a situation like where he can be a clear number two, a scoring option that gets real shot volume, like in Sacramento, for example. I don't think he'll get traded for Sacramento because I don't think there's a trade there. But if he were in Sacramento, hypothetically, next to like an A cuff, where he's kind of forced to have a different shot diet than just being a spot up guy, you're kind of forcing him to work on that handle, going to get his own shot on a rebuilding team. I think he could take a real jump. The biggest thing Jabari does need to improve on, besides obviously his handle, is his mentality on the court. I think he needs to play with more confidence. I think he needs to be more willing to make mistakes. If I look at another top 3 overall pick on his team in Reed Shepard, who is only in year 2, has clear rough stretches on the court, but he still at times just tries to take over offensively. He'll get to his 3-point shot, obviously, but he'll go into the paint. He'll get to his mid range. He'll try and do anything to kind of spark this Houston offense that at times, especially post injuries, was really struggling. And Jabari just did not take that step enough. And if he does get traded to like a Boston for a Jalen Brown, I do feel like he could just stay in this role forever as this really good defensive piece that just kind of gives you shooting offensively, can maybe give you like a mid-range shot, and the three obviously, but doesn't really take over games. That's my biggest worry for him. But if he does get a chance to prove himself, which maybe he will in Houston this year, maybe he'll get traded to another place where he can have a bigger offensive role. I think he has a chance to get better. Okay, this is one of my favorite ones of the whole video. If I'm a rebuilding front office, scanning the league for the next Brunson style sleeping star, AJ Mitchell is exactly what I'm circling. He, like other people on this list, is coming off a career year and points, minutes, assists, rebounds, everything. But what he really showed us, especially in the playoffs, in that second round against the Lakers, was that he could step up as a scorer and as a primary offensive threat. He averaged 22 and 6 in that series. He gave you good defense. You could make the argument that he was easily the best player in that series, not named Shea. And it's interesting because Mitchell's path to the NBA was very much an underdog story. He was born in Belgium. He came up through the French league as a young player before going to college. He actually played with a young Wemby before ending up at UC Santa Barbara. He just has a very non-linear path to the NBA. It's interesting because he was selected in the second round of that 2024 draft. There was actually a guard picked ahead of him. OKC took Nikola Topic 12th overall in that draft, and he hasn't really seen any playing time because of injuries and other stuff. But still, like they weren't really picking AJ Mitchell, anticipating him to be what he is now. And it's a credit to the Thunder and Sam Presti because they did figure out pretty quick what they had in him. They locked him into a team-friendly extension worth roughly $3 million-ish a year over 3 years, which is easily one of the best value contracts in the league. He won't be an unrestricted free agent till 2028. And if he can continue to progress till then, he will be a prime candidate for a team to throw 30 million plus at to see if he can run the show. And he probably will progress because the Thunder are shedding expensive vets. We've already seen they moved off Aaron Wiggins, they moved off Isaiah Joe. Lou Dort is probably next, but as of right now, he's still on the team. But there's going to be minutes up for grabs. There's going to be shots up for grabs, and they're probably heading Mitchell's way. Um, and it's not just the stats with him. Shea himself has said out loud at one point that Mitchell's got a real feel for the game. He doesn't need plays just drawn up for him. It feels like when he's playing alongside him that it's like a pickup game, more so than like a structured offense because he just instinctively makes the right read. And that's a lot of the stuff that people were saying about Brunson that final year in Dallas. So if I were to actually make a prediction out of everybody on this list, um, who is the guy I feel like will be the next star on a team that is not his own? It would probably be Mitchell. Um, it's also interesting because he will be behind guys like Shea, J Dub, and Chet the next couple of years at least. But he will at least be bringing like real championship caliber mentality and like elite winning basketball on his resume, and that makes him an even more prime candidate to lead a different franchise because he can bring the style of play with an increased role, but he can also bring a culture change and he can be a leader. He can bring the stuff that he saw in OKC to a rebuilding franchise, and I think that's really interesting. And he's almost the player that I saw and kind of spurred me on to make this video on this whole who's the next Jalen Brunson conversation. I really feel like if I were putting my eggs in a basket, it would be Mitchell. Okay, so what's the actual takeaway from all this? It really is to highlight the amount of talent that's just sitting around in the league to show guys that if they got the opportunity to take the next step, I believe they could, or at least there's a good chance that they could. Will they reach the heights Brunson reached? Probably not, because only a handful of players have, especially from this starting point. It's really tough. Also, I think Brunson has stuff he can't measure. The mentality, the way he was so focused and locked in the last couple of years, especially during this finals run, it's just not something you can measure or replicate out of the blue. It's something that's hard to find. All that being said, I still think it was a cool exercise to see which guys in the league have a chance to be the next diamond in the rough.